8 minutes and 46 seconds, Black Lives Matter. White silence is white consent, Black Lives Matter. Hands up, don't shoot. All lives matter. We know that you as immigrants have special situations because not only often are you people of color, as they now say, BIPOC, Black, Brown, Indigenous, people of color, but you also have the problems that you've brought with you from other countries, the fact that you've left your families, that they're alone, that you have to sometimes help support them, that you're fleeing for different reasons. There are many situations that you feel, and we want to express that at Boila, all of us are sympathetic to you, we support you, and we are there for you. So please know that. I just wanted to say that yesterday I went to a vigil and protest in Alexandria that had over 1,000 people. Today, I understand that tomorrow in DC, right outside our building, will be over 1 million people in demonstrating. So this movement is getting a lot of support, and it's time for change. It's time for change also in some immigration issues. So today we're going to talk about parole. What is parole? When do you need it? How do you use it? What are practical tips that you can have that will help you to get it? At the end, I would just like to say that we feel that there's a special need for people to have some special help for if you're in a situation of depression, anxiety, or isolation. Perhaps you're not even an immigrant, and we want to provide that for you. So I have a very special expert guest next week called Dr. Linda Ritchie, and this is what she does every day. This is her profession. She counsels people for a lot of money. If you are on next Friday at 10 o'clock, you will be able to ask her questions for free of what you can do. So take advantage of that, share it with everybody, let them know. And at the end of this presentation, if you like it, let us know. We want your feedback. Give us a thumbs up, say thank you, suggestions if you like, but we're looking mostly for what you got out of it. Okay, so let's start today. I'm Danielle Beach Oswald. This is Daryl Cancel. He is going to be talking about parole, and I'm going to be asking some questions. Then you get to ask some questions. We'll talk for about 20 minutes. This is an area that he does all the time. He deals with many people from all over the country in this area. So let's get started. Yeah. So Daryl, when do you need to parole?
But immediately after you cross the border, that's the best time for you to file for your parole, right? And even after that, if you have been denied, for example, a parole, you can always refile again. So the earliest, the better for you to file parole.
So if you say I have a relative who got stopped at the border,
okay,
and they came across the Texan border or the California border, they're going to have a hearing. Do I need to bother about parole?
Yes, you do. Because the best way to win a case, right, or the best way to represent a client if the client is outside. You have more time, you can prepare more for the case. So you do want to be reunited with your sibling or relative. So you do want to file for parole. You do want to get the person out of detention. And so that's the first thing that you're going to do. The ICE officer is going to request some documents, and then you can. The best way to win this, if you find an attorney that can help you do this. There's two different things. There's parole and there's bond. If you cross the border and you're an arriving alien, then it will be a judge, the one who will be making the decision. But if you present yourself at a port of entry, then it will be an officer who will be making the decision.
So if you entered iwi without inspection, then you would be able to ask that of an ICE officer instead of the immigration judge.
Correct. If you cross the border, if you did not go to a port of entry and ask for asylum, you just crossed the border and then you were apprehended, then you're at what we call an EOE, and then it would be a judge who would have jurisdiction over your custody.
What if my relative got arrested in California and I don't know any lawyers there? What do I do?
Well, you need to find a lawyer. But if someone is being arrested and you want to file for a parole, you want to get the person out, we have some tips, right?
But we can do this,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, we can do that. So
because as immigration lawyers, we're licensed in all 50 states.
Mhm.
So anything immigration, if you have a parole, and we've done many for California, Texas, Arizona, so
Louisiana, Mississippi, everywhere.
exactly.
Yeah.
And yesterday, we had a client who had been stuck in jail at Oklahoma. What was the name of the jail?
It was in Mississippi.
Oh, Mississippi.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
And he was stuck there for a year. And sometimes, because they had done it themselves, the parole had been denied. So the more times you do it, if you do it and it gets denied, it's best to do it straight away. Do it correctly and do it with a lawyer, then try and do it yourself because, you got less chances.
Yeah. And I think that something related to that is that if you wait for later to file for your parole, one of the things that you have to prove in order for them to let you go is that there's a relief for you and that you're eligible for a relief. And then if you file this later, then maybe you have an order of removal already, maybe you have lost your BIA appeal. So it's harder for you to prove that actually there's a relief out there and I do want to proceed with my immigration proceedings and I do want closure and I'm not a fly risk. So that's why it gets like more difficult when you file later and later and later.
So if I just entered, what are things that I can do today to get ready to give to the lawyer for parole?
Okay, so there's some things, basic stuff that you need to prove. For example, you need to prove that you are the person that you're saying that you are. So you need identification documents, right? And your lawyer can, we can explain to you which one are the best documents. And if you don't have a document, then we can find out another documents that are also good documents that we can use to prove your identity. We have to prove that there is a relief, that you are going to be filing a relief, that maybe you're going to file for asylum or you're going to file for, if you were in the United States, then maybe you are going to file for cancellation, that there is a relief. And then also you have to prove that you have family ties, that you're not a fly risk. And they usually deny most of the paroles, right? Because that's the hardest.
Saying, right,
yeah, the fly risk is like
risk
the
of
hardest
flight,
one.
right?
Yeah.
And especially if you've already had your hearing and you've been denied, then they don't know that you're going to appeal or that you're going to be approved on appeal. So the sooner the better. That's what we're telling you.
Yeah.
The sooner the better.
And that's the one that they usually deny the most, and that's actually a legal argument. So we do write memos with our paroles, and then we discuss why our clients are not fly risk, and that's the best way to get them out.
So say you don't have a brother or sister here in the United States. Who would you use, and what would you need from them?
Okay, so you will need a sponsor, right? So, and that means that someone is willing to receive you and at his or her house. The best sponsor is always, like you said, a brother, a sister, a parent. But if you don't have that, it also can be a family friend. And even if there's no one, a family friend, you can file a parole and use a nonprofit as a sponsor or a church or something like that. What you would need an affidavit. You need proof of the address where you're going to live. We usually use like utility bills and
tax returns.
Tax return. Well, you also have to prove that the person is employed,
right? Right, that you can support them. And
yeah.
Do you have to prove that that person who's the sponsor is a U.S. citizen or permanent resident?
Yeah, that's the best way to do it, because then you can tell the ICE officer, you can tell the judge, this person has been vetted already by the government. Right. So when they're filing this affidavit, the government know who this person is. Is a United States citizen or an LPR. So if you don't have status, you're not the best sponsor.
And you can't be the sponsor and say, okay, but I don't want that person living with me, can you?
No, you can't.
Right. We just had someone who had done that recently, and we're like, no, can't do that. So what do you think is is there a money issue? Do you have to pay to get out of jail?
Yes. So when you get paroled, you will get I don't see, so you will get a amount of money, right? You can get out by no money at all and would be only on an order of recognizance, or they will start putting like $1,000, 2,000. It will be it's case by case. For example, if you also have to prove that you are not a flight risk, but you also have to prove that you're not a danger to the society. So if you have been in the United States and you have been arrested a few times and then you get arrested because you have never pursued an immigration case, you can file for a parole. You're allowed. But then you have all these criminal issues, and then you have to prove that even though you have all these criminal issues, you're not a danger to the society. And if you get out, you will get like a really high bond.
Right. So danger to society and risk of flight.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two most important things immigration uses to deny people.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And, if you have someone who can support you and you have this relief available to you that's going to enable you to get a green card, doesn't mean you will or guaranteed, but at least the less times you've appealed, obviously, the better
Mm-hmm.
chance
Yes,
you
correct.
have of that. So what are typical bond amounts?
So it usually between if you cross the border, let's just talk about an immigrant that had just entered the country, right? And it's not someone that has been here, and it's not. We can prove that it's not a danger to the society. So bonds would be between like $5,000. We have gotten people out no bond, only order of supervision, and you can do that if you can prove that the person has a lot of family ties. Her parents are here, her siblings are here, everyone is here. So you can actually try to get someone out no parole, only an order of supervision. But it would be between like $5,000, $10,000. It can go to 15, 20, 25. Yeah.
And if you have a criminal record or a criminal arrest, are you likely to get a parole?
It's very unlikely. But the thing about this is that if you have a criminal record in the United States, most likely you're not an arriving alien, you are an iwi. So it would be a judge, the one with the jurisdiction. And in front of a judge, you have more chances to win, even though you have a criminal
Now,
charge.
what about if you're in the country, you got a bond from a criminal judge? Does that mean automatically you're going to be paroled for immigration purposes?
I didn't follow.
So you got a bond for you committed a crime, and the state court judge issued a bond. So you're out on bond, and immigration picks you up, and people say, "But I have a bond.
Yes.
Can I get a parole?"
Yeah,
automatically?
it gets more complicated. Yeah, because this is a different bond. This is an immigration bond. Yeah, and you have to go in
Much
front of an
more difficult.
immigration. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Much more difficult.
You might get out of federal detention or like state detention, but then you go to like immigration detention. Yeah.
So, are there any other situations where you might use a parole that would be issued?
Yeah. So when you file for parole, right, you're asking your ICE officer to redetermine your custody status. For example, if it gets denied, you have to wait 180 days for a custody review. But if something happens before those 6 months, if you get sick, or for example, what's happening right now with the pandemic, there's specific circumstances that are considered extraordinary circumstances, and then you can refile for a parole, and you don't have to wait for the 6 months for that. For example, maybe you have not filed relief now, but now you have filed relief. So you can always file for a parole if you can file some extraordinary circumstances that will let you file for this.
So this is a great relief. That's great to know, right? Yeah. And not sometimes lawyers refer to these as custody reviews, not necessarily paroles, but it's a kind of parole nonetheless. If immigration denies your parole, such as the client I had yesterday in court at Dallas, Texas, he was videotaped from Mississippi, where he had been stuck for a year despite the fact that he had a U.S. citizen sister, then you want to try and get that hearing, right?
Yes.
As soon as possible and get them out. What about once you get granted Is that a parole when you get released, or
When you get
how does
granted your
that
relief,
work?
or you get granted your
When you
parole?
get granted
Your
your relief by the
Yes.
judge.
Okay, so when you get granted your relief, and you have been detained all this time, you just get out. You don't need a parole for that. But if you had filed for parole before and there's a bond, right, and you get granted, then you get your money back, which is why people want to pursue the relief, right? That's part of like the flying risk factor. Um,
So let's talk a little bit about what happens after you get paroled. So you get paroled, you
okay.
go live with your relative,
Mhm.
your aunt or your brother or sister or whoever it is. Um, are there any conditions sometimes imposed on you
They will,
with the parole?
yeah, they will always be conditions. So
And
you're
what are those conditions?
So most of the time, you'll get a letter explaining all the conditions. They are usually the same ones, right? It depends. We have clients in Mississippi. We have clients here in Virginia, which is ISAP, but it's different in every state. So I don't know exactly the name of the office that will take care of that. But yeah, there are conditions. You cannot travel, for example. You might get a monitor on your ankle. You will have not only your ICE officer, but you might get an ISAP officer or the name of the company in the state where you are. So you have to be there. Most of the times, they come visit you every Friday. So you have to be in the place that you said that you're going to be living every Friday. And also you have to report to ISAP, and also you have to report to ICE. So yeah, there are conditions.
And we
Yes.
find that what our clients hate the most is that electronic monitor
Yes.
on the leg.
Yes.
So the first thing people say is, but I'm out. Why do I have to have a monitor?
Mhm.
Well, the monitor is because ICE, and I hate to say this, but it's because they make money
Mhm.
through independent contractors, usually
Mhm.
called ISAP, because it's alternative to detention, ATD. So what happens is that, okay, that's not the sole reason. Their reason, they say, is because your risk of flight,
Mhm.
because they don't know that you're going to appear to that hearing, right? They
Yes.
don't know that you're actually going to disappear or something like that. So usually that monitor can be taken off
Yes.
at some point, often after you've gone to the first hearing and you've proven that you've also complied, like you've been available for home visits, you've been your monitor's working, you've called in when you're supposed to, and if you're in compliance after a period of 3 months, 6 months, usually you can get that off,
Yeah.
can't you?
And that is very important. If you get out on parole, you do want to comply with your order. Because if you do not comply, then you're gonna go back to detention, and there's no way we can get you out. It's gonna be harder because you're not complying.
Right.
Yeah,
And
it's very
sometimes,
important.
though, when they say you're not complying, you actually are complying, but there's problems with the system, right? Like
Yeah.
it doesn't, it beeps or it doesn't respond, or maybe you had to go out just during that time you went out for a walk, or you went out to do grocery shopping, and you don't know what time they're going to call you during
Mm-hmm.
that day, and they happen to call you during that time, and then they say you're not in compliance. So try and find out exactly as much as you can
Mm-hmm.
when they're going to call, because otherwise you're stuck home all day
Mm-hmm.
that day. And you want to be in compliance. That's
Mm-hmm.
very important.
Also very important that if you're going to move, your sponsor is going to move, you have to provide with a new address where the sponsor is going to move, and a new affidavits, and we're all moving to this area. And
Exactly. Yes, that's a very
yeah.
good point. That you know, keep your lawyer informed of
Mm-hmm.
these things. Keep your ICE officer informed
Mm-hmm.
of these things. If you have a lawyer, the lawyer is going to inform the ICE of this. Um, what about orders of supervision? Is that the same thing as parole?
So you might get an order it's not the same thing, it's two different things. But you might get an order of supervision once you are paroled. You will get an order of supervision. But order of supervision, for example, if you get removed, right, and there's problems with the government trying to remove you, they might give you an order of supervision, but you're already outside. So it's two different things. But the gist of the thing is that you have to report to ICE, so ICE know that you are not a flight risk, or you're not trying to disappear. So,
Right. And usually they like to have a passport, because that way something goes wrong, they can frankly ship you out. Otherwise, they have to get laissez-passer or some kind of pass from the embassy that your country you're from. So that's always an issue. If you're on an order of supervision, please keep your lawyer informed of that, because it may be that you need a motion to reopen filed right away, or a stay filed right away, or something else filed right away, because they can pick you up. We had one gentleman who had been reporting for
20
years.
years.
Yeah, years on an order of supervision, and suddenly he appeared 6 months ago, and they kept him and jailed him for 6 months. Again, don't assume that just because you've done it, you're going to be able to do it. And Daryl also spoke about travel. Travel restrictions are usually imposed on these things. So that means you can't go usually outside the state. You can go to work, you can do things like that, but you can't get on a plane or,
you can't
go other places. So just be careful with that. So we're going to get to some of your questions now. Let's see if I can see your questions.
I'll go down here.
So, first of all,
let me just go here.
What are my responsibilities?
This is the first one.
If I want to sponsor a friend?
If you're filing an affidavit committing to receive someone, you have a lot of responsibilities, right? You have to provide a house, you have to provide food to this person, and then also you have to provide, because most likely this person doesn't have a work permit yet, so you have to make sure that this person will retain an attorney and will continue to pursue the his or her immigration proceedings. So you do have a lot of responsibilities if you're going to be a sponsor.
And usually the one they don't like is that the sponsor usually has to provide tax returns, right, to prove that they can support or have the means of support, and that they are in compliance for that person. And if you're a sponsor and you don't want to give the tax returns to that particular person, understandable, you can give it to the attorney. The attorney is not going to is just going to see that you're in compliance, that you have enough to support that person and your family, and then they're going to shred your taxes if you wish, or return them to you. So it's not going to be that your confidential information is going to get spread around, or unfortunately they do want to have that, though.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because if you send your documents to your attorney and your attorney see that these tax returns are not enough, because the attorney knows the burden, he will advise you, like, okay, let's just try to get a different sponsor, or let's just try to get maybe pay stubs, like more actual pay stubs, or other sources of incomes that we know that the client is going to get released.
Right. So
I think this one here that we says, do I have to pay the bond amount, or can a family member pay? Okay, so that's a very good question. So if you are in detention, there's no way that you're going to have the money or that you can pay. So the process of paying is the sponsor is the one who's going to pay, right? And the sponsor has to go to an ICE office. Usually, if it's Baltimore, they will go to ICE Baltimore, and there's different places to go where you can post bond. And it's very specific instructions as to how you pay bond. For example, if it's a $15,000 bond, for example, it has to be just one check for the whole amount. You have to prove evidence of your status, and you have to prove that you are the person who is going to be the sponsor. Yeah. So it's your relative, the one who actually pays the money.
Okay, next question. Can you request a bond reduction?
Yes, so you can request. Yeah, that's a really good question too. You can actually, you can request a reconsideration of the amount, and you can do that to an ICE officer, and you can also do this in front of a judge. If a judge sets a bond that you cannot pay, you can request a reconsideration. And the best person to do this is an attorney that will work with all the documents that you have, and then if there's not enough document, your attorney will tell you what other documents you can provide that will make the bond a lower bond. So, but what we do in this office is that we file really good packs, because we're always aiming to get the lowest amount possible, or even no money at all, right? So we do file
release on recognizance is always the best, but that's not always what you're going to get these days. So, and remember that the bond amount has to be given by the sponsor, not that you're providing that money. So that's a very important distinction, I
Yes.
think, too. This bond redetermination request to judges, and we've done that many, many times. So what will my status be when I get out on parole?
Okay, so your status will always be the same. For example, if you are filing for asylum, if you're in on parole, you're an asylee, right? You're just filing an asylum applicant. So even if you're out, you're an asylum applicant. So your status is not going to change. You're just going to be out on parole, and you're going to be able to pursue your relief from the outside and not from detention.
Very good. And when I'm paroled out, will I be eligible for a work permit?
Again, that's related to your relief. If you had filed for asylum and you have the 150 days, yeah, you will be eligible. Or if you're going to be on an order of supervision, or even there's also the I-94, right? When you get paroled, you're going to get an I-94 that is valid for a whole 1 year. And there's a category where you can get a work permit for that year.
That's an excellent point, because most people don't do that till after they get out, and then they only have maybe 6 months or 2 months so you want to file that right away so you can use that category. So that's very helpful. How long does it take to get the money back once you're released? Oh, they never want to give money back. It takes a long time.
It's a whole process, and it depends on if you use a bond. That's a very complicated question, right? It's very different with the service that you use, and
so one thing you don't want to do is use one of these services that charges interest, and then they will never give you back the amount. Typically either use immigration or use a bondsman that your lawyer goes through, because that way you will get the money back, but it's a long process. You have to actually win your case, or secondly, you have to leave the country and prove that you've left the country. That's the only way you get your money back. So if you win the case, do you get your money back the way you paid it, same day? No. You have to wait at least 6 months. You have to fill out paperwork, you have to send it in, and then you have to follow up on it. It's not like an automatic refund, unfortunately. So my nephew has been held for 1.5 years now after his asylum was being denied, followed by 2 appeals, 1 parole, and then another is underway. Is there any possibility for me to get him a bond?
This is Marian. She's one of our clients. Yes. So as we explained at the very beginning, it gets harder and harder once the case continue going forward. The easiest way to get these people out is your nephew was at the very beginning. But since you're mentioning, he was denied.
Multiple denials already.
There's multiple denials, so it's more difficult. Yeah. However, there's extraordinary circumstances that you can use. For example, where he is detained and how is
if they have
the
COVID in the jail, or if he has severe medical problems, he may be eligible. But if he's just a young guy who just came across and he's healthy and he has no particular other issues, it's going to be very hard to get him out. Okay. Hello, everyone who's saying hello to us. What documents I need to submit on behalf of my cousin to be paroled? So I think we already answered that. A lot of it's family affidavits, taxes.
It's very case by case.
Yeah,
so
every case is different.
It's very case by case, and even if you think that you know what all the documents and you provide all those might not be enough. So you might want to go to your attorney, provide with all the documents, and see if those are enough. And then if they're not, we will tell you this is not enough. We need this specifically, more affidavits. We need more proof of employment, more proof not only that you live in this address, but maybe that you also own the house, right? Like mortgage documents. So we will let you know which ones are the best documents.
And often I have people who'll say to me, but I did it for my cousin 2 years ago. It was so easy. I just gave my tax returns. It's not that way anymore. It is a lot more difficult. And there are people, yes, who do get their relatives out, But, you know, you want to be sure to check with a lawyer. If you think you can do it yourself and then you fail, I mean, go to a lawyer right away and try and figure out. They'll tell you why you failed and what you should have done.
Because you only get one chance. It's just
Yeah,
one chance. If it's
really.
denied, then you have to wait until your custody review, which is 6 months. So you only
Right.
get one chance. You have to do it right.
And the more denials you have, I mean, once you get a denial, it's usually they try to repeat that cycle of denials. So if I came out from detention with a bond, will the bond be reimbursed after I'm done with my case? If yes, how long does it take the money to get the money back? So we just answered that, I think. That's a good question. Thank you. And you don't get, by the way, all the money back on the bond, because I think there are some expenses that are held back. So it's not like you paid $10,000, you're going to get $10,000 back. But you do get, I think, we don't deal with how much you get back. Usually we help you to get it back, but we don't deal with it once you get it. So it goes straight to you. It doesn't come to us. What is the difference between a motion to stay versus a motion to reopen? Okay, that's a good question. It's a bit outside the scope of what we're covering today.
Yeah,
we are going to talk about motions to reopen and motions to stay because that's actually a really good topic.
Yeah, that's a really good question, really good topic. Just a quick, we can just say that motion to stay, for example, if your parole has been denied and you had a final order of removal and your removal is imminent, then you need to file a motion to stay. And what that means is just requesting ICE or DHS not to remove you, and you have to explain why. For example, because I have to file something that is pending, and I just do not remove me until I get a decision.
Correct. That's a very good point. Okay. If my parole expires before I get my work permit, can I renew my I-94 to be eligible for a work permit?
That's a good question, and we get that question all the time. If I can renew my I-94 to get a work permit. I think Ms. Oswald can respond to this one. They're not renewing anymore the I-94.
So we used to do this all the time, so that people could get their work permits extended. So what we used to do is send people to CBP, Customs Border Patrol. We used to send them to CIS, get another extension stamped, and they would do it, and we file work permits. They're not doing that anymore. So that's sort of gone away. It's sort of a loophole, frankly, that they were doing, and they realized it and they took it out.
Yeah, that's why if, for example, you had a relative that if you have done the parole yourself and you have an I-94, you don't have a lot of time to retain an attorney. You have to retain an attorney because this is going to expire at some point. You only have 1 year, and there's a relief that you need to file, and based on that relief, you will get a work permit. So, you have to do this.
Okay. If I live in a different state than the one I mentioned while coming out from detention when my case is on, I think what that question is saying can you live in a different state than the state where you were? So you have to live in the state where your sponsor is for a parole. You can't live in a state that is of your choosing. You also, this is very important, you can't go live with your sponsor and then say, oh, but I got a job in Maryland, so I'm going to move to Maryland now, because if your ICE officer finds out, which they will, then you will not be in compliance and they will take away the parole and the bond, and you could be rearrested. So be very careful with that. That's something you don't want to mess around with.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So very good question. I think that is all our time, and I think that we have answered all your questions. If you have other questions, just email them to us. This is going to be posted live also. You won't be able to add new stuff to it, but you can share it with other people. So just hit the share button, or you can give us a thumbs up if it was helpful. And we appreciate you for listening. Thank you. And I just want to remind you again, it's a very special opportunity you have to listen to the expert, Dr. Ritchie, who's going to speak next week, Friday and ask her your questions, because she is a clinical psychologist and will be speaking about ways that you can deal with this isolation, anxiety, and depression. And then we may be doing a series on this of different types of areas, of psychological areas, to help you. If we get a lot of feedback and we see that you really like it, appreciate it, and are grateful for it, then we will continue to do those, because these are not done by us. Obviously, we are not the experts in that area, so we want to provide you with the greatest experts and the best support possible. So again, if you're our client and you're having issues, or you have concerns, or you have a relative who has issues of any kind in immigration anywhere in the U.S., please reach out to us. We're here, we're available. And sometimes, obviously, we are working remotely from home many times, so just reach out to us. Our phones are always available. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And we wish you the best. Bye-bye.